Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
I was awoken in the middle of the night by something screeching in the house. A horrible, wretched wail that sounded half human, half animal, wrought with fear. Jerking up in the bed, it took me a moment to orientate myself. It must have been in the early hours of the morning, and the room was still in pitch darkness. The screaming came again, and I realized with sudden, dreadful clarity that it was my cat Muffin who was making that noise. What was the matter with him? Climbing groggily to my feet, I half stumbled through the darkness, reaching blindly for the door. He never usually cried out like this, especially that horrible screeching cry. I'd never heard him do that before. I wonder if he had seen something that spooked him, a shadow outside or something. "Muffin," I called out, my voice echoing faintly through the house. "What's wrong, kitty?" I fumbled for the light switch in the hallway, blinking as it flooded the landing with a bright orange glow. At the bottom of the stairs was darkness. Creeping down the staircase on tiptoes, I whistled gently for Muffin. But he didn't come running like he usually did. I couldn't hear him crying anymore either. Rounding the corner to the kitchen, my eyes scanned over the floor, landing on his cat's dishes. They were still full of food and water, and there were wet paw prints leading away from the bowl. When I lifted my eyes, I saw him. He was sitting on top of the kitchen surface, where he wasn't usually allowed during the day. But that isn't what bothered me. He was staring out of the window with all his hairs on end, his tail ramrod straight. Something definitely had spooked him. "Muffin, what's wrong?" I murmured, stepping over towards him. "You see something out there?" The tabby barely responded to my voice, even as I inched closer. Whatever he was looking at out there had stolen his attention completely. Coming to stand beside him, I gripped the kitchen surface with my fingers and peered outside into the bushes that lined the property, fencing the garden off from the neighbors. Shadows crept across the lawn, obscuring my line of sight. The street lamps in front of the house didn't reach this far back. My security light had stopped working a couple of days ago. I cursed myself for failing to replace the bulb. "What are you seeing out there, huh?" I mumbled as a shiver prickled over the back of my neck. Somewhere in that darkness, out there, I felt the uncanny sensation of something watching me. "Must just be some kind of animal," I continued, shaking my head, the sound of my own voice echoing in the kitchen, reassuring me more than the silence. Whatever noise Muffin had been making before, now had fallen completely silent. "Muffin, come on. There's nothing out there." When he made no attempt to move, I threw my hands up. "Fine, stay here. I'm going back to bed." Turning, my bare feet curling against the cold tiles, I made it to the doorway before pausing, goosebumps running along my arms and neck. Behind me, Muffin started to growl. "What's wrong with you?" I muttered, retracing my steps. His back was arched, and a low, deep growl reverberated along his vocal cords. Whatever he was seeing out there, he didn't like. "Is there another cat? Is that it? Come on, leave it alone. It's getting too late for this." I reached out to touch Muffin's back, my fingers barely ghosting his fur, before he bolted off the kitchen counter, skidding along the tiles and streaking out the doorway. I rolled my eyes, exasperated. Stupid cat. I flicked one final glance at the window, and a shiver of dread crept down my back as I saw a shadow streak across the lawn, larger than any cat I'd ever seen in the neighborhood. Pressing forward to peer through the window, I tried to track the shadow that I'd seen, but it had already gone, sneaking back into the darkness around the edge of the property. The same thing happened the following night. Muffin woke me up with his terrified cries, reaching right into my dreams and yanking me awake. It was unusual behavior for him. He'd never woken me up before like this, and it wasn't like him to cry so verbally. I attempted to ignore it, thinking he would eventually just quiet down, but after a few more minutes of listening to his screeching whimpers, I went downstairs. Not bothering to flip on the light switch this time, I padded blindly into the darkness of the kitchen, my eyes already landing on the shape on the counter. Once again, his body was hunched low to the surface of the counter, his back arched in a warning. Come on, Muffin. Whatever it is out there can't get you in here. The cat barely preceded me, standing behind him. His eyes were tracking something as it moved across the garden outside. Something I couldn't see. Remembering the large shadow that I had glimpsed last night, I wondered if there really was some kind of animal out there. Maybe a wild dog? The area was too urban for any kind of predator. The only small animals we got regularly around here were foxes rummaging through trash cans, and the occasional stray. Curious, I leaned forward again to peer through the window, and then darkness encroaching on the lawn. I really ought to get this security light fixed. Maybe then whatever animal was out there wouldn't come creeping around here again. As I stared out into the night, a pair of bright glowing eyes stared back. My heart thumped. There was something out there, definitely an animal, though I couldn't see much beyond those luminescent yellow eyes. Even as I watched, the bushes around the creature began to tremble and shake with sudden ferocity, and I began to gauge an understanding of its true size, more like a big cat or a wolf than any scavenging rodent. No wonder Muffin seemed so spooked by it. I watched, barely breathing, as the form slunk out of the bushes and crept along the lawn on all fours, glistening eyes meeting mine. A shudder peeled over me at the sight of it. An animal this big shouldn't be out here, whatever it was. Muffin growled again, his claws scratching into the surface, and when I went to pick him up, he lashed out with his teeth bared. "Hey, calm down," I said, staggering back from his vicious snarl he gave me. "I've never seen you so riled up." Muffin went back to watching the animal outside, and I slowly backed up, my heart thudding dully. My cat had never acted like this around me before, almost as though I was just as much a threat as the predator outside. When I looked back out, there was no movement in the shadows, and I assumed whatever it was had moved on. The next morning, I was taking out the trash. I noticed the back gate was swinging on its hinges. I always had locked it. It slammed against the house when it was windy, but something had forced open the bolt and left it hanging open. My immediate thought was that some kind of intruder had broken in, but the deep gouges on the bottom of the gate suggested it wasn't a person at all, but something else. Something with claws that could penetrate deep into solid oak. Trudging through the gate into the back garden, I felt a shiver of discomfort touch the back of my neck. Last night, these bushes had been where I seen those eyes watching me. It was unnerving to think that the animal, whatever it was, had been so close to the house 2 nights in a row. I found myself hoping it didn't return tonight, but moved to wherever there was a better food source. As I approached the bushes that boundaried the property, I noticed deep impressions of the dirt that looked like footprints. Crouching down to take a closer look, the grooves in the grass definitely weren't human, but belonged to an animal, a large one, with long, extended claws. They belonged to no animal I'd ever seen in the area before, and I wondered where it had come from. Had there been a predator that escaped the zoo somewhere? Or was it a wild beast pushed out of its home that had found itself in an urban space? It seemed unlikely, given the lack of reports on such an incident. If there was a wild animal loose in the area, I would definitely have heard about it by now from one of the neighbors. I debated calling animal rescue and patrol, but decided to wait and see if the animal returned tonight. If it had moved on, I wouldn't need to worry about it anymore, and hopefully Muffin would let me sleep through the night. With a final lingering glance over the strange animal tracks and the broken twigs and leaves scattered around the bushes, I headed back inside, making sure to close the gate firmly behind me as an extra precaution. I wedged a plant pot in front of it to prevent anything from getting inside. That night, it wasn't the sound of Muffin crying that woke me up, but something shattering. My first thought was the plant pot I'd put outside the gate to stop anything from getting to the garden, but the crash sounded much louder, much closer. It had come from downstairs. Bolting up in bed, I immediately reached for my phone, charging on the bedside table. I glanced at the time, just after 3 a.m. In the silence that followed, all I could hear was the heavy thudding of my heart in my chest, the ragged sounds of my breathing. Was someone in the house? There was a possibility it was just Muffin knocking something over, but part of me knew it wasn't. The gouges of the fence, the tracks in the garden, whatever had been stalking us outside was now in the house. I was sure of it. Swallowing hard, I dialed the emergency number on my mobile and prayed for the line to connect quickly as I crept towards the bathroom door, listening outside for any other sounds. Just as a voice flooded my ear, something else crashed downstairs, shattering the stillness. I whimpered softly. "Hello? Is someone there?" The dispatch responded, and I quickly recovered my voice. "Yes, I think there's an intruder in my house. I think it's an animal. I'm not sure. A big one. I need someone to come over and..." A deep, throaty growl rolled through the house, making my body go cold with fear. "Oh God," I breathed, my fingers shaking as I reached for the lamp, yanking it off its cord. I'd feel better with a knife or something sharp, but they were all downstairs, where the animal was. "Stay where you are, and stay quiet. Try barricading yourself in if possible. The police are on their way to you." "Thank you," I whispered, sweat pouring along my palms as I hefted the light. The woman on the phone had told me to stay where I was, but all I could think about was, what about Muffin? Was he okay? Had he been hurt? What if he was still down there? I knew it was stupid to even entertain the thought of leaving my room, but by the time I considered the implications, I had already had the door open and the lamp cord trailing behind me. I moved as quietly as possible, going down from my toes to my heel, sticking close to the wall so that I was hidden in the shadow. At the first sign of danger, I'd run back to my room and barricade it with the dresser. Creeping to the edge of the landing, I peered down the stairs, gripping the lamp tightly in my palm. Darkness flooded the bottom, and silence spread uneasily across the house. What was going on down there? Had the animal left already? Or is it waiting, hiding in the shadows, until I went past? Maybe it was watching me right in this moment, its eyes glinting in the dark. I shook away the fears, cursing myself for being irrational and paranoid. I didn't even know what kind of animal it was. It might not be dangerous after all. But if it had broken into the house, it must have some strength. All the doors and windows were triple glazed, reinforced. How it managed to smash through them filled me with an uneasy dread. I listened out for any signs of its presence, a breath that was not my own, the soft patter of paws, the rustle of fur. Nothing. Dead silence. Part of me was tempted to put down my guard and rush downstairs, but I knew that was foolish. Leaving my room had been foolish. There was still time to go back. But then I heard it. A soft whining wail. Muffin. He was still down there, maybe even in danger. Could never live with myself if I left him in the hands of such a cruel fate. Against all reason, I began to descend the stairs. I had lived in this house for years, and my feet knew every weakness in the wooden slats, knew the location of every creak and groan. I made my way down in silence, hardly breathing. If the intruder was still down there, I couldn't hear it anymore. Maybe it really had left. Hefting the lamp to the other hand, I peered around the wall, dividing the staircase from the rest of the house. The kitchen was just across the hall. It seemed the most likely source of the crash, since the back garden door was made entirely of frosted glass, and it was where I had seen the animal before. Nothing but yellow eyes in the darkness, a black shape streaking across the grass. The thought of it made me shudder. I held my breath, waiting a beat. Nothing disturbed the silence. Once I was confident in my movements, I stepped out of the shadows of the staircase and padded towards the kitchen, pressing my back against the wall with another stifled breath. Almost there. As soon as I confirmed the house was empty, I could grab Muffin and hide upstairs until the police came. At least, that's how I planned it in my head. But I had no idea if the house really was empty, or where Muffin was hiding. But I couldn't leave him, knowing he might be in danger, might be injured. He was all I had for family. I moved quickly, twisting around to face the kitchen door with the lamp held aloft, ready to strike if anything came at me from the dark. Nothing. The kitchen was empty. Still wary of the shadows, I went inside. Pain immediately exploded along my foot, and I staggered back with a gasp. Wincing hard, something warm and wet began to pull against my skin. And I realized too late there was glass all over the floor, shattered into thousands of shards. Cursing under my breath, I limped back, leaning heavily against the wall with ragged breaths. If the animal was still here, I just alerted it to my presence. It felt almost like a trap. The way the glass was sprinkled right in front of the doorway, on the opposite side of the kitchen to the broken door. How it had gotten all the way over there? The rest of the kitchen was trashed. There was a smashed plate on the floor, and appliances had been knocked over on their sides. But no animal, no trace of anything at all, other than the mess it had created. The rest of the house was quiet too. But just because the animal wasn't inside didn't mean it was gone. It had easy access between the garden and the kitchen now that the door was broken. I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. Muffin! I hissed lowly, squinting to see if I could see the cat anywhere. I knew I heard him cry earlier, which gave me hope he was still in the house somewhere. Muffin! Come here, kitty! A shape darted suddenly to my left, and my heart plummeted into my stomach. My fingers grasped the light, ready to strike. Oh, Muffin! I gasped in relief as the cat rubbed against my leg, crying softly. I'm so glad you're safe. I scooped him up, wincing at the pain in my foot, and half stumbled back upstairs. When the authorities came later that night, they confirmed that the animal had left. Upon my request, they took samples from the tracks outside and ran it through the database. The results came back inconclusive. The strange thing is, at some point in time, they began to get secretive about the results, and they did their best to quiet me down about the entire incident. All I know is animal tracks in my garden belonged to no animal they had ever seen before. No one returned my calls after that. Now, on most nights, I can't help but look out my window. I don't know what I expect to see, aside from the yellow glowing eyes staring back. Tonight's story was written by Hair-Raising Narratives and is titled The Mystery Animal. If you enjoyed this story, chances are you will enjoy the other content that he creates. Please check out his channel and his website. The links will be in the description below. Hey, did you know I have merch? Yeah, it's crazy, right? But I do. And if you like to walk around representing my realm and gaining new travelers, the links to my merch store as well as all my other social medias will be in the description below. As always, I want to say a special thank you to all my lovely Patreons. 242 Reads, Rando Calrissian, Pam, Seraphine the Midnight Bard, Creepy Clown Girl, Mia Mina, Philia Noctis, Hair-Raising Narratives, Spooky Boo Scary Story Time, Breaker 19, and Nathaniel Nelson. If you'd like to join these lovely travelers but let them on fire, you can do so by becoming a Patreon as well. Just remember, the support is always appreciated but never expected. Please, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ding that bell if you're new for all future content, as will really help the channel grow and push this video out into the algorithm.
But as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.